Bhagavatam, because it was the most important authoritative Vaishnava scripture. Although Bhagavad Gita was the essence of all Vedic knowledge, presented in a brief ABC fashion, Srimad Bhagavatam was also elaborate. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and Bhaktivinoda Thakur had both written Bengali commentaries on the Bhagavatam. In fact, most of the great Vaishnava acharyas of the past had commented on Srimad Bhagavatam, the spotless Vedic literature. An English translation and commentary for this book could one day change the hearts of the entire world. And if Bhaktivedanta Swami could publish even a few books, his preaching would be enhanced. He would go abroad and with confidence and not appear empty-handed. Bhaktivedanta Swami returned to Delhi with the new purpose. The paper and printing capital of India was in Chandni Chowk section of Old Delhi, and Bhaktivedanta Swami thought it best to somehow locate himself there to regularly negotiate for printing books. Through an old printing contact, he met a temple owner who gave him a free room in his Radha Krishna temple near Chandni Chowk. The neighborhood was called Chippiwada, a congested mixed Hindu-Muslim quarter. Now Bhaktivedanta Swami could work either in Vrindavan or Delhi. With new enthusiasm, he picked up a few donations and began again publishing Bhakti Godhead, while at the same time beginning his translation and commentary of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is Canto 6, Chapter 1, entitled The History of the Life of Ajamil, and it's text 46. Yateha Deva Pravaras. Yateha Deva Pravaras. Trai Vidyam Upalabhyate. Trai Vidyam Upalabhyate. Bhuteshu Guna Vacharyat. Bhuteshu Guna Vachirat. Thank you very much. Tatana Yatra Anumayate. Tatran Yatra Numuyate. Yateha Deva Pravaras. Trividyam Upalabhyate. Bhuteshu Guna Vaichitriyat. Tatan Yatra Numuyate. Yateha Deva Pravaras. Trividyam Upalabhyate. Bhuteshu Guna Vachitriyat. Tatan Yatra Namuyate. Pravaras. Trividyam Upalabhyate. Gutu Guna Vachitriyat. Tatan Yatra Namuyate. Deyateva Pravaras. Adhyate. Deshu Guna Vachite. Yateha Deva Pravaras. Trividyam Upalabhyate. Bhuteshu Guna Vaititrat. Tatan Yatra Namuyate. Yata, just as. Iha, in this life. Deva Pravara, O best of the demigods. Trividyam, three kinds of attributes. Upalabhyate, are achieved. Bhuteshu, among all living entities. Gunavachitriyat, because of the diversity of the contamination of the three modes of nature. Tata, similarly, anyatra, in other places. Anumiyate, it is inferred. In translation, O best of the demigods, we can see three different varieties of life which are due to the contamination of the three modes of nature. The living entities are thus known as peaceful, restless, and foolish, as happy, unhappy, or in between, or as religious, irreligious, and semi-religious. We can deduce that in the next life, these three kinds of material nature will similarly act responsibly, please. O best of the demigods, we can see three different varieties of life which are due to the contamination of the three modes of nature. The living entities are thus known as peaceless, restless, and foolish, as happy, unhappy, or in between, or as religious, irreligious, and semi-religious. We can deduce that in the next life, these three kinds of material nature will similarly act. The actions and reactions of the three modes of material nature are visible in this life. For example, some people are very happy, some very distressed, and some are in mixed happiness and distress. And this is the result of past association with the modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. Since these varieties are visible in this life, we may assume that the living entities, according to their association with the different modes of material nature, will be happy, distressed, or between the two in their next lives also. Therefore, the best policy is to disassociate oneself from the three modes of material nature and be always transcendental to their contamination. This is possible only when one fully engages in the devotional service of the Lord, as Krishna confirms in Bhagavad Gita 14:26. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samiti chetan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down under any circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the spiritual platform. Unless one is fully absorbed in the service of the Lord, one is subject to the contamination of the three modes of material nature and must therefore suffer from distress or mixed happiness and distress. Omagyanatamalanda Shaganandana Shalakaya Chakshun Malitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swabadantika Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So that's quite straightforward, isn't it? You've got three choices. You can be happy, unhappy, or in between. Or your fourth choice. What's your fourth choice? Oops. What's that? You can transcend it. Yeah, that's your fourth choice. So why wouldn't you choose to transcend it? If you stop the person and say, "Excuse me, sir, would you like to be happy, unhappy, or a bit of both? Or how do you fancy being transcendental?" What do you think he'd say?
Because there is a tendency not to remain in a specific mode, and also it means, as you mentioned on the purport, that there will be another birth.
Yeah.
Even if you're in a mode of goodness. you have to take situational mode of goodness in the next life.
Yeah.
Cycle of
So
birth
why
loss.
would anyone, if you ask somebody, if you stopped someone and said, how do you fancy being transcendental? Because it was very big, wasn't it, at one time, transcendental meditation. People were like really excited about transcending. You know, you think if you do some transcendental meditation, you'll go in some like psychic cosmic experience, you know, around the universe or something. So it's like that. Just like this microphone is transcendental. So is that okay? Can you hear okay? All right. I'll transcend it. Oh, maybe that's the best way to do it like that, right? And then you can look cool at the same time. I've just transcended the false ego. So it seems great, doesn't it? Oh, and transcend. I think I'll go for transcend. But then you find out transcend isn't quite as easy as you think it might be. Because transcend would mean that you'd have to learn to control yourself. Even if you're doing simple yogic practices, you know, if you suddenly decide, I'd like to be really slim and not age as much, I think I'll go for yoga. But then you find, well, that means there's going to be a lot of hard work there. You're going to have to regulate. You're going to have to be systematic. You're going to have to watch what you eat. You're going to have to even watch out who you hang out with, because if you hang out with the wrong type of people, then you could end up getting a veggie burger at McDonald's or something like this, you know. So when we say be transcendental, then it doesn't come easy. Transcendental, because you have to know, you have to be, and you may not even, at least if you know that's an option anyway, that you can be transcendental, and then you can train to become transcendental. But you'd have to have a clear understanding of what that was in the first place to be like, you may get up and you may be chanting and you may be feeling like you don't really want to do this, or it's really boring, and you can't seem to get into it. And then Bhakta Bob comes over and says, Prabhu, just transcend it. Just, you know, rise above all the influence of the modes of nature. And it does sound good, but it's not quite that easy, is it? So we're really getting into the nitty gritty now. If you don't, like Raghunath Prabhu was saying, if you decide you don't want to take that option and you just want to take your chances with being happy, unhappy, and a bit of in between and a bit of both, then first thing is you'll be coming back for another birth. So you may be thinking, well, I don't want to pay such a higher price. I'll go for the cheap option. But then it turns out the cheap option is quite expensive as well. It's like you're going to buy a diamond and they're doing them over there for £3,000. And this dodgy guy over here with his own fold-up table is knocking about at £3.50. And you think, okay, well, that sounds okay. I'll go for the £3.50 ones. But then you find out they're stolen. And then after you've had them for some time, then you get thrown into jail. So then it doesn't seem such a cheap option anymore. So if you decide you're not going to go for transcendental, you'll just go for the modes of material nature and try and be happy and take the rough with the smooth. Then you'll be taking birth again. And taking birth again, birth is even more painful than death. And death isn't pleasant in itself. But birth is a more prolonged, sustained period of suffering before you take birth again. And then when you take birth, the first thing that happens is you get a good slap. And then it's one slap after another, and then you get dragged out, and then back again for another slapping session. So you could be thinking, I think I'll go for transcendental, actually. I mean, at least there's hope at the end of it all. Whereas with this, it just goes on and on and on. It doesn't seem to end, you know. Endlessly mutable, it's referred to in the Bhagavad Gita. So you could be revolving around the 14 planetary systems in 8,400,000 species of life ad infinitum. Anyway, that's a really good way to kind of emotionally get a little bit more involved in the process of becoming transcendental. And it's important to do that, to go beyond just being intellectual about it, and to have a more kind of a feeling about it, a strong feeling toward wanting to be transcendental. And then a clear understanding of what that is, what is transcendental. You could reflect back the way I behaved yesterday over this situation. Was that very transcendental? Or did I get caught up by the modes of nature? And what would have been the transcendental way to have dealt with that same situation? Can I learn to do that the next time? Because the situation is probably going to come up again. And can I change the way I react to things? So actions and reactions of the modes of nature are visible. Some people are happy, some distressed. It's interesting the way karma works as well, because it's not necessarily that if you do get born in a rich aristocratic family and you become famous as a footballer or a pop star, that necessarily means that you're going to be happy. So it's interesting, isn't it, how karma works? Your karma also determines whether you're going to be happy or not, irrespective. Like, you may have earned the pious results of getting a massive red Lamborghini, which are worth £250,000, by the way, because I know a guy that sells them. So you get it, but you're really miserable. And somebody else, he doesn't have anything practically. He just has a bus pass, and he's laughing his head off all the time. He's always happy. And people are saying to him, why are you happy? You haven't got a Lamborghini like him. And he goes, I know, I don't know why, but I just feel so happy all the time. I just keep singing, and when I'm on the bus, I dance around a lot. And I'm always telling people jokes, and then I'm just so happy. So it's interesting, isn't it, that karma, the way your karma works, it even determines whether you're going to be happy or not. And they say if you want to be a proactive person, in the 7 habits of highly effective people, it mentions that the first habit is being proactive, and the very first thing you can be proactive about is being happy. That you can just decide to be happy. So that's anyway, that's a glimpse of what transcendental is. Transcendental is that you're satisfied with whatever the situation is. You've learned that austerity to be able to tolerate and be satisfied with whatever it is, whatever the situation is, rather than getting caught up. Achihara priyasas charprajapani amagrama. Achihara is over-endeavoring, collecting more than you need, never being satisfied with what you've got. So that ability to be able to just accept and to appreciate, not just to accept, but to appreciate. There's a story actually on ISKCON News, and it's a couple from Ukraine, and they ended up in Hungary, and they woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and a missile had just hit the house next door and blown it to smithereens. So they thought probably best to move out. So they grabbed a few belongings and 2 children, and they just ran out, tried to get to the nearest train to get away, And they were just saying how wonderful it was in Hungary, and the devotees were so kind to them, and they have a place to stay now, and some service to do, and some prasadam. And they were so grateful, so appreciative, So if we don't learn this ability to appreciate what we have and be satisfied with it, then sometimes Krishna has to make an arrangement so that we do appreciate it. Not that they didn't appreciate it, but we can look and think, wow, we're taking all this for granted. But just to live in a peaceful situation and to have a warm, clean environment and nutritious food and good association, these are all very, very wonderful, privileged opulences. So unfortunately for those people that don't have those opulences, then there's those varieties of happiness, unhappiness, and mixed. And then that determines their next life also. So if you don't learn to resist the influence of the modes of material nature, and you don't learn to transcend, then they just self-perpetuate. And if you're on a bad track, Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, I cast them down again and again into more and more demoniac species of life. So once you go down the wrong road, trying to reverse the process, the further down the road you get, the more difficult it gets. Especially when you go down the road. Once you go down the mode of ignorance road, and it's very difficult. Things get very dark and very hopeless. Therefore, the best policy is to disassociate oneself from the three modes of material nature and be always transcendental. So when we talk about the three modes of material nature, what we're really talking about is two modes of material nature. There's passion and ignorance. And goodness is a little contaminated by passion and ignorance. And when it becomes pure goodness, then it's not in the modes of material nature, it's Vasuddha Sattva. When you're completely pure and there's no contamination anymore of passion or ignorance, then you're transcendental. So you could say the mode of goodness in the material world is a tiny, tiny bit of passion and a tiny, tiny bit of ignorance, and mainly mode of goodness. But if it goes completely pure mode of goodness, then it's transcendental to Vasuddha Sattva. So then Srila Prabhupada gives the solution to how to disassociate yourself from the modes of material nature, rather than trying to fight with them and getting further entangled and implicated in the modes of material nature. Just engage yourself in full devotional service. And then not to fall down in any circumstance is the stage of Nishta, where you become fixed, where you're rid of 75% of your anarthas, and now it's only onward and upwards. Unless one is fully absorbed in the service of the Lord, one is subject to the contamination of the three modes of nature and must therefore suffer from distress or mixed happiness and distress. Any questions or comments? Yes, pardon.
Thank you. You see the verse that was quoted in the purport, Mam Chayo Vyabhicharana, is when the one engages in devotional service, he instantly rises above the modes of material nature. So how to understand, when people come to devotional service, we have so much, contamination and conditioning. And so some people might naturally be more mode of goodness, and if like getting up early or like being very clean, it's already there, but it's still just material, it's just conditioning. Whereas, someone could their conditioning is much more maybe mode of ignorance or something, but they're engaged in devotional service, they're still transcendent to it, and at the same time, how do you not get attached to like mode of goodness or something? Do you feel
well, it's like if you have a prison and the cells where the really, really hardened criminals are, they're getting beaten about the head with blunt instruments and poked in the stomach with sharp sticks. And the prisoners that are in the nice cells with gold-plated bars on the windows, and they get a choice of 3 cereals in the morning, and they can listen to classic FM at certain times of the day, and then suddenly someone shouts out, someone's knocked a hole in the wall, we can get out. Well, you can be sure the ones that are getting the rough treatment are going to be keen, maybe more keen than the ones who are having a reasonably comfortable time in the prison, So the problem with the mode of goodness is it conditions you to happiness, and you think it's not too bad, all things considered. Whereas yes, somebody in the cell where they're in straitjackets and they're getting beaten on the head with planks of wood every day, they're like, this is absolutely terrible, I'll do anything to get out, and I'll do anything to avoid coming back in. So that is the problem with the mode of goodness. is that it can do that. It can condition you to just, you get free from all your sinful reactions. You start leading a nice life. You wash your socks every day. You don't smell of BO anymore. You wave at old ladies, and you only buy food that's that's organic and not been tested on rats, and then things are going great for you, you know. So you think, well, even if I don't become a pure devotee, I'll be coming back as something nice in my next life. So no sweat, you know. Let's just chillax. So that's the problem.
Hare Krishna, thank you for. How can we remain compassionate to people and not become entangled?
How do we? Well, before we remain compassionate, for most of us anyway, we have to become compassionate. And it's hard to be compassionate if you don't realize how much people are suffering. That's why Srila Prabhupada was very compassionate. You know, when they were telling him what they were doing when they were playing golf, Prabhupada started crying because he could see it was such a waste of the human form of life. For somebody who knows how much people are missing out on what they're missing out on, then they would feel the great loss. But for ourselves, initially we should be trying to have compassion on ourselves. We should be compassionate to ourselves. You know, are we really aware of what it is we have lost? Are we really aware of how unfulfilled we are in our potential as living entities, as conscious entities? Do we realize what depths of love and wonder that we are not being allowed access to right now? We're so heavily compromised, and we're just thinking it's not too bad. So, you know, if the doctor's in the hospital and everyone's rolling around writhing in agony because they've got some terrible disease, and the doctor's got it as well, and then he doesn't really, he's suffering just the same as everybody else, you know. So real compassion will naturally develop when we regain our healthy condition and we experience the bliss of having a personal relationship with an absolute personality who is completely pure and perfect in every respect, and is, you know, such a wonderful living entity to interact with and to relish a relationship with, and we're experiencing so much bliss from that. And when we see other people unaware of that, then we feel so sorry for them, you know, what they're missing out on, how they're so much riddled with fear and anxiety because they've accepted an illusory dream as reality, and we've woken up to some degree from that, and we're saying no, there's a lot of an amazing, life is very amazing, you know, and people are struggling to even continue on, you know, from day to day. So then compassion. They say it's the first quality that develops in devotional service as you're making advancement, spiritual advancement. The first symptom of the first budding of pure love is this compassion. And Krishna refers quite a lot in Bhagavad Gita to being friendly to all living entities and this kindness. It's the first quality actually of 26 qualities of a devotee as well, kindness. So he's feeling that people are very unfortunate, and he wants to help them. He wants to share what he has with them to relieve them also of the burden of the suffering and the ignorance that they're experiencing, you know. It's like seeing somebody in a dream, and the person in the dream is stricken with fear because they're being chased by a tiger and they're petrified. The tiger's getting closer and closer, and they're screaming and so much anxiety. And you want to gently nudge them and say, it's okay. There's no tiger. We're here in the room. It's safe. Everything is fine. So that will naturally come as we become more awake ourselves from the dreaming condition. But what's funny is when you're very new at devotional service, and you go out and you're looking at people, and you're feeling like you're the one that's suffering, you know. I've got to stand out here all day and pass out these books, and I've got a hole in my shoe, and I didn't get enough halava this morning, and that work was really rude to me as well, and look at him, he's got an amazing pair of boots on, and he's looks like he's had a good breakfast, and he's got a far out car, and he's laughing his head off. He looks like he's really going places. So how can you? So then it's very difficult to feel compassion for someone that looks like he's having a better time than yourself. So it's only when you're starting to really become absorbed in spiritual consciousness and really experience the bliss, the genuine relief of becoming free from the fear of death and feeling that you belong somewhere, that you're going home. And I'm just reading that now in Sankalpa Kaumudi. Toward the end, the emotion that's stimulated by bhav is the longing to go back to where you belong, to go back to your home. You know, people are orphans right now, and they're trying to make this their home, which is ridiculous, because how can you make a temporary situation home? No matter how hard you try, it's a futile attempt, a dismal, doomed to failure. And we're on the other hand tending away from that, and every day we're taking a step closer back home, where we belong. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you for the lesson. It strikes me like, it's like a hard thing to do. You know, life has taught me anything difficult, you need help. And I'm wondering the role of a teacher. You know what I mean? I mean, thinking of self-control and things like that. I just think that's it's really difficult, those things, when you're in the eye of the storm and something's happened and that problem or that thing is in front of you. Do you know what I mean? And it's hard to find a way, because all those feelings that come up from like a place of damage, don't they? You know.
So
like the broken bit of me would react to the guy with the comfy boots and the jolly look. You know what I mean? It's the broken bit of me that might feel resentment or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's how to get through that on my own without guidance. You know, it's a difficult thing. It seems to me. You know, anything I've had to do that's very difficult in my life, I've come to the conclusion, I need some help with that, because it's difficult.
So if I got the question correctly, then it's just you're commenting that you experience the difficulty of making progress in spiritual life and becoming more self-controlled and becoming more less triggered by the way other people are misapplying themselves in life. And although intellectually, there's a lot of things in Krishna consciousness that we intellectually accept. We accept it 100%. There's not a problem with it. But emotionally, we may find it very hard to accept. Like, you may be able to accept 100% that your mum is not her body, and she's a spirit soul. She's part and parcel of Krishna, and and then suddenly your mum leaves her body and goes somewhere else, and then you realize, well, emotionally, I'm really struggling with this, although I understand intellectually. So that's the intermediate stage, which is where you're shifting from being in a heavily conditioned situation to coming into an unconditioned situation, and there's an intermediate stage in between. And the intermediate stage is probably the most difficult part of the territory to traverse. It's the anatta nivritti stage. It's where there's not very much taste for spiritual things, but there's a lot of awareness and discrimination about what you shouldn't be doing. But there's still a taste for the things that you shouldn't be doing, and we're still heavily subjected to the illusions, although at the same time we know that they are illusory. And so that's the tough part, because until we start coming out of the nata nivritti stage, and we start to experience some ruchi, some taste, then it's very vaidhi means vaidhi bhakti is that you're regulated. It's not whether you want to get up, you have to get up. It's not whether you want to, you just. And then when you start getting to the stage of ruchi, you want to get up. It's like I get to chant, I want to chant, I love to chant. So it's an affirmation. So the first stage is we have to see it's an opportunity. I get to chant. So many people don't get to chant, and I'm getting a chance to chant. And then once you started to appreciate the opportunity, then the next stage is I actually, not only do I get the opportunity, but I want this opportunity. And that's why Krishna has given me, because I want this opportunity. And then when that matures, then you love the opportunity. You love the fact that I'm going to get to chant today. I love the fact that I'm going to get a chance to do some service. I love the opportunity I've got to be able to read and understand something about the philosophy. But the first stage is I get to. So at least you're getting the chance to have a challenge, to face a challenge in your life. I get a chance to have a challenge. I get a chance to challenge my conditioning now. I get the chance. Wow, what an opportunity. And then when that becomes fixed, then I want this. I want this more than anything else. I really want to make advancement spiritually. And then once the taste starts coming, then I'm really loving this, And that's why being in the association of devotees is good, because it helps you to see how the process works. So the more people, the longer people are practicing it, the more they're loving it, the more they're wanting to do it, the more they're excited about doing kirtan and chanting and service. There's a real drive there to want to do that. And you think, if I just hang around long enough, then I'm going to be experiencing what he's experiencing. So I just have to stick with it, And then they'll say, I went through that stage myself. It'll last for a certain period of time. Then you'll get some realization. You'll see things in a different way. And then you'll move on to this next stage, And it's interesting, because if you were to look at the territory, then it's quite interesting the way it looks. If you had a landscape of what it looks like on spiritual advancement, the first stage is like this. It's all like the ground is all furrowed. It goes deep down, it goes up, it goes deep down, it goes up, it goes deep down. So if you look at the person, how are you today? I'm up today. Next day, oh, I'm down today. And next day, oh, I'm up today. And you say, that guy's like a yo-yo. He's not getting anywhere. But if you look at him from the side, he's actually making progress. And eventually, after a period of time, the ground goes level. And then you ask him how he's doing. You go, things are pretty steady and pretty much the same as yesterday. And things are okay. I've got things on an even keel. I feel pretty stable these days. And pretty much every day, his level of enthusiasm is the same, And then you get to the stage and it goes like that. And then you see him and he goes, oh, I'm just sliding along. Woo-hee, it's so easy. Woo-hee. And he's getting faster as he's sliding down. It's just a smooth slope all the way down. And then eventually he's back in the spiritual world, So the first bit is tough, then it levels, and then the fun starts when everything becomes easy. That at the stage of ruchi, you're actually you have a tremendous drive, to do things. And you see that with the older devotees in ISKCON, the initiating gurus and Srila Prabhupada especially. There's such a drive, to board the Jaladuta and go across. Such a powerful drive, so much compassion to want to do that, So yeah, it's just part of the course. It's there because of our karma. Then the ground is quite broken and irregular, and we have to traverse that. There's no getting around it. But it gets finer. It gets less. When you first start, it's like really, and then it starts to go, and then eventually it just settles down. Any other questions or comments?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. It's interesting that this, how you call it, verse comes from the Bhagavad Gita in the purport, how to transcend the modes of nature, to be kind of engaged constantly with unfailing in all circumstances. And for my conditioned mind, I usually interpret it as like to unfail in all circumstances and be fully absorbed. It's kind of on a physical level that you're just like from the first moment of the day up to the final moment of the day, you're like a fully physically engaged. And I think there is that as well to some extent, but actually in this purport, it explains in a different way. It says it's about absorption, that to be fully engaged and failing in all circumstances, that means you're fully absorbed in all circumstances. In Krishna consciousness, it gives kind of a deeper and more subtle perspective. I don't know if you can say something about that.
Yeah, well, when you think of absorbed, what does that bring to mind? It's like a sponge, isn't it? Because a sponge can absorb. So when you're absorbed, and the most concentrated absorption that we have is our japa period. So it gets to the point where you become so absorbed in Krishna that you forget what Maya is. You become so free from influence. And if you go up to a sponge that's been soaked in sugar water and you go to it and poke it, how are you doing today, sponge? It just gushes out sugar water. You just get it all over you, So when you're so full of Krishna consciousness and someone comes up and says, and pokes you in the belly and says, how are you today, fatty? You're just like, oh, Krishna is just so beautiful. No, who you call him fatty? Have you looked at yourself lately? So when we're absorbed, where there's an overspill, you become so full of Krishna consciousness, and then you distribute the overflow. It's just anyone you come in contact with, you give them a book, you give them some prasadam, you give them the holy name. Even if you don't directly do anything, just the fact that they've come in contact with you, that it has an effect upon them automatically. And it's interesting. A man was showing the students. He said, "I'm going to do something now, and I want you to tell me if this glass beaker is full." It's like a big glass vase, And he got these stones, and he put them inside, and he says, "Do you think it's full now?" And they said, "Yeah." And they said, "Okay." Then he went over and he got some sand, and he poured the sand, and the sand went in between the rocks and filled all the gaps in the rocks, And he said, "Is it full now?" And they said, "Yeah." And then he went and got a jug of water, and he poured the jug of water in, and it filled up. And he said, "Is it full now?" "Now it is full." He said, "So what does that mean?" And nobody knew what it meant. They're all like, So what he was saying was, if you take care of the most important things first, you'll fit all the rubbish in anyway, all the little rinky-dink things. If you just get the most important ones fitted in, make sure they're in, and then all the fiddly stuff, you put that in afterwards, So when you're doing your japa, all the little fiddly, idly, bitsy, witsy things that normally occupy us, that all has to just be left till later on. And we know, well, I'll find room to squeeze it in some way or other. But if I fill it with all that first, I'm not going to be able to get the rocks in, So you put the most important things in first. And Krishna's saying all the time, don't worry, don't fear. Just be confident. So Krishna doesn't want us fretting over whether or not he's going to take care of us. He wants us, it's saying like fully absorbed, fully, just give yourself fully. Don't worry, don't hold back thinking maybe this is not going to work, maybe I'll do it and Krishna won't catch me. You just give everything and I'll be there for you. So Krishna's asking you to do that. Trust me, he's saying, I've got your back. You give everything and I won't let you down. I promise you I won't let you down. And the devotees that have been doing service for some length of time will say the same. Krishna never lets you down. He's always there for you, And that's why Queen Kunti was saying, just keep putting me in the situation where all the time you keep coming to save me. because then I'm saved from the repetition of birth and death. So if you want to stay comfortable and avoid all the problems, the only problem is you put yourself in the most uncomfortable situation by having to take birth again. So if you don't like discomfort, then get out the material world. Don't hang around. You can't make the material world comfortable. And so, yeah, there may be some discomfort in the transitional stage, but be sure that as you carry on, the transitional stage will get smoother, and eventually you'll just walk it. It'll just be a breeze, They say that if you give 99%, then it's really difficult. But if you give 100%, then it's really easy. So that's what Krishna is saying. If you give everything, well, what Krishna wants actually is your consciousness. He's saying, just give me your consciousness. It's most suited to being conscious of me. And if you try and make it conscious of anything else, it just won't fit. So, use it for what it was designed for. Your consciousness was designed for Krishna. So, unfortunately, because we've been meddling around for so long, we've lost that appreciation. And Krishna's saying, look, if you just put it back where it belongs, it will fit, and it will be you'll be using your full potential. It's like if you say to somebody, "Oh, have you seen the shine coming out the window?" And you're like, "Shine? What are you talking about?" You see, the shine coming through the window off the sun. You say, "Oh, you mean the sunshine?" So in the same way, when you say consciousness, unless you say Krishna consciousness, it doesn't mean anything. That's what it is. Consciousness is designed to be conscious of Krishna, of your relationship. If it's just shine, what does shine mean? Consciousness doesn't mean anything unless it's Krishna consciousness. That's the real item. That's what it's supposed to be, pure. When water is pure, then it can be utilized nicely. It quenches your thirst. If it's got things floating around in it and fungus and slime, then it's not going to act as water is supposed to act. So consciousness is like that. If it's Krishna consciousness, then it's the real item. Otherwise, it's not. It's contaminated in some way, and it won't be drinking. It won't be very pleasant. Any other questions or comments?
In this translation, and I think in the last one too, he talks about religiousness and irreligiousness. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about this and what it means in comparison to transcendental nature.
Yeah. So there's four pursuits in the human form of life: artha, karma, dharma, and moksha. So that's economic development, sense gratification, following religious principles, dharma, and then finally moksha, becoming liberated. So just being a religious person, being a nice person and a kind person, and you don't get sinful reaction for it, but you get pious reaction. So you go to a place in the prison house where things are more pleasant for you. It's much nicer, but you're still in the prison house. And when your term of imprisonment is up, you're taken out, and then you're thrown into another cell, and you don't have a choice over where that next cell is going to be, and you're restricted in the cell to having your meals at certain times and only being able to go as far as the boundary wall. And so all these restrictions are in place. So you could consider yourself as doing really well because you're a religious person, so you're in these really nice cells, and he's an irreligious person, and he's in a smelly one over there. But whether you're in a smelly cell or you're in a nice rose-scented cell, you're still in the prison. And both of you are confined by the boundary wall, and the boundary wall is the shell of the universe. If you go flying along in your spaceship, the first layer you hit is the layer of Earth, 10 times thicker than the diameter of the universe. That's the first layer. You probably won't get through that. The next one's water. So you're encompassed inside that. So being religious doesn't get you out. And moksha, liberation, it gets you out, but you have like this ball and chain on your ankle. So you get out, but eventually you're dragged back. Because you're still not allowed to be a free citizen. You're still restricted. And then eventually you get yanked back. So even moksha is liberation isn't enough. And that's the most, leading a really religious life and being really, really strict and pure, the most you'd be able to get from that would be liberation. And even that wouldn't be enough. But if you get bhakti, if you get devotional service, then you go beyond all of those and you satisfy all the things that you could achieve by following those things. Your senses will be gratified. You'll have nice prasadam. You'll be satisfied. You'll be happy. All these things will be achieved in a much better way if you circumvent all the intermediary processes and go right for the real thing. So, yeah, we have to watch out for that, because if you think you're a religious person, then you can become proud and look down on people who you consider that are. And that's the paradox of being a devotee, because you're supposed to feel like everyone else is better than you, but according to your lifestyle, you're better than everyone else. You know, you had a shower today, and you don't pick your nose in public, and you serve the porridge in the morning with a smile on your face. So you're doing really well, and he's so rude, and he's smelly, and he's horrible. And so I'm better than him. So the paradox is that although you're leading a better lifestyle than somebody else, you feel that the other person is better than you because they haven't been given the same opportunities that you have. And if they had, they would be doing so much better than you are. And by the grace of Guru and Garanga, I'm here, and I'm so fortunate. I'm so unworthy of this opportunity, but somehow I'm here. So I'm getting the chance to lead a better way of life, but it's not due to any credit on my part. So it's a fine line you have to tread, that you are leading a better lifestyle, but you have to proactively see that everybody is better than you, and stay humble. You know, that's a tricky one to do that. And religious people do tend to look down on other people. I think, oh, they're the infidels, and those people are going to hell, and they don't turn up at our church or our religious community, so therefore they're outcasts. Whereas a truly spiritual person, someone who's feeling his living relationship with God, then he automatically feels his living relationship for all God's parts and parcels. You know, if you love God, then you love the creation of God as well. And his most wonderful creation is the living entity. He creates the material energy, and that's quite amazing in itself. But the living entities that are in the material energy are even more amazing. You know, the fact that something possesses consciousness and is alive. It's funny because we take it so much for granted here on this planet. But if they were on Mars and they found even a microbe, they'd be like, "Wow, it's alive! It's alive!" They'd be making such a big fuss about it. But here, we can't move for life. There's life oozing out of everything, but we've lost an appreciation for it. You know. Jai, ISKCON Guruvinda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gauda Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. All of you ki.